Hello and welcome back everybody. Today we're doing Black Myth Wukong on the proposed recommended requirement. I know Wukong is out for a while ago, but that video was in my backlog for a while, so I'm taking it out today. So the proposed recommended requirement are as follow: i7-9700 or AMD Ryzen 5 5500, 16GB of memory, RTX2060, Radeon RX5700 or the Intel Arc A750. SSD require, and the above specification were tested with DLSS, FSR and XeSS enable. So I guess we have no choice to use those settings. Welcome to Response PC, I'm Dunk. Let's game on. Starting off, we have the Ryzen 5 5500, which I don't have, so it would be the Ryzen 5 5600G, which on paper have zero difference in performance. Then pair with the RX5700 non-XT, because I don't have the non-XT, so the XT variant have about 7% more performance on paper, and 16GB of memory. And since we looking at the proposed recommended requirement, we're going to play at 1080p, try to reach 60 FPS, that's my guess, and at high settings, and also to enable FSR, XeSS or DLSS, whatever apply to the GPU. In this case is FSR. And with that setup, you get 55 FPS average, which is not 60 that we are targeting. At least I don't know what the dev were targeting at that time. And you saw quickly at the end of my intro, I quickly enable Frame Gen, and then I have 74 FPS. I don't have in between to get 60 FPS. So your call. You want to play under 60 FPS or over 70 FPS, but you need Frame Gen. But remember, I have the non-XT variant, so 7%, you may get the 60 FPS without the Frame Gen. CPU wise, we are in the mid 20 to mid 30s, that's perfect, and the memory, we are using 14.8 out of 16. That's done for the red team. Now let's jump to the blue and green team. So we're going to have the i7-8700 instead of the i7-9700, because I don't have the 9700, but there's only a 6% performance over the 8700, so it won't make a difference for this game, as you see. Then let's start with the RTX2060, obviously at 1080p still, high settings, and DLSS without Frame Gen. And the RTX2060 is holding quite well for this game. It's not even pegged at 100%, we are in the low 90% of utilization. The 6GB VRAM we're using at 5.7, so I think we can even crank a little bit to some settings at ultra, I guess. For the i7-8700, even if it's a 6% lower performance than the 97, the CPU is still wavering between 35 to 40% utilization. A lot of headroom still available. For the memory, out of 16, we're using 12.1GB of RAM. And lastly, the all blue, mean the i7-8700 with the A570. In this situation, keep in mind that Intel prefer PCIe Gen 4. This is PCIe Gen 3. You need to go on a Gen 10 and higher to have PCIe Gen 4. So maybe this affects a bit the performance to not be able to reach 60 FPS, because we don't. At 1080p, high settings, XeSS enable like the dev recommend, we're reaching an average of 54 FPS. We're just below the 60. At least I have resizable bar, so I don't lose the performance on that area. GPU is back at 100%, using 6.7GB of VRAM out of 8. The CPU is doing mostly nothing at the mid 20s to 30% of utilization, and using 14 out of 16GB of memory. But I'm on PCIe Gen 3. But if you enable Frame Gen at 1080p with XeSS, now you're just over 60 FPS. We are at 66 to be exact. And I didn't see much artifact, to be honest. But if you watch my video of Wukong on Arc GPU, the A750 is able to play at 1440p cinematic graphic settings to get 40 something FPS. But we are on Gen 4 PCIe, so the A750 can definitely play 1080p XeSS over 60 FPS if your motherboard have PCIe Gen 4 instead of 3. I'm pretty sure that's where the performance is lost. But with Frame Gen enable, you see a little rise in the CPU usage. We are now in the 50s. Verdict: the RX5700 the RTX2060 and the A750 are the best graphic card for the proposed recommended requirement. I won't argue against that. CPU wise, you can probably go lower, but for the Intel GPU, get at least a 10 gen CPU and a 10 gen motherboard that go with it. But you can go probably lower, like a 10300 i3. And that's all for the proposed recommended requirement. Thanks for watching, see you on the next one, and subscribe.